Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this 1/72nd scale Supermarine Spitfire from Airfix. This is the first plane kit I've built since I was a kid, and you guys have been wanting me to build one for a while, so I bought this a few weeks ago while I happened to be in the hobby shop. I figured why not do one of the more iconic planes for my first kit build on this channel. The Flames of War planes don't really count as kits, there's not much to build there. Anyway, the front of the box has some artwork depicting a Spitfire, obviously, that has just ruined the day for what appears to be a Ju-88. The back of the box has ye old standard Airfix advertising stuff. The sides of the box have a paragraph about the Spitfire in a few languages that aren't English. And on this side, the English paragraph along with some basic painting and marking suggestions. The sprues in this kit come wrapped in a plastic baggie to prevent the parts from being lost. Fortunately, all of the parts in my kit were still on the sprues where they should be. All of these parts are fairly neat, especially for an Airfix kit. I was expecting there to be more flash and mould lines. They are there, they're just not as bad as I was expecting, which is nice. The detailing seems reasonable. I'm not a plane expert, so I can't tell you if it's especially accurately detailed or not, but it looks good to me. You can't see it especially well, but there's a clear plastic canopy included, which allows for much better visibility than an opaque canopy would. You won't be surprised to learn that there's a sheet of decals with a selection of appropriate markings. These look decent enough. There's also this instruction sheet. This is large, like pretty much every other Airfix instruction sheet I've ever seen. There's only one page of actual instructions. There's also a couple of painting and marking guides, which I think are a good inclusion. Let's get to building this. I start by assembling the pilot's seat. This is quite simple. The seat goes nicely into the recess of the base part, facing the short end like so. Then, this part slots right onto the back of the seat. Not especially tricky at all. The instructions suggest gluing the pilot in at this stage too, and he doesn't look especially bad. I only cleaned the mould lines off the top part of his body because that's what's going to be visible. I sat him on the seat to see how it looked, but I'm not sure if I will actually be putting him in the plane when I finish it. At any rate, I'm leaving him out now. If I do include him, I will paint him separately because that just makes things a lot easier. I then assembled a propeller. I clean the mould lines off the blades and other parts as much as I can, and then I glue the propeller into the hub. I then close it in with this back part. The join between the hub and back part is pretty messy, but I'm sure I can clean it up later. I leave it to set for a while before I attach it to the rest of the plane. I then test fit the two halves of the fuselage together. As you can see, the fit at the rear is pretty good. The same can't be said about the front around the engine area. I clean that up a little bit test fitting as I go. Before joining the two halves together, I glue in this, I assume gun sight, here, using my knife to nudge it into position properly. Then I glue the pilot seat in here. I sandwich it between the two halves of the fuselage, though I probably could have slipped it into place after both halves were glued together. I only glued the rear half together to start with so I could focus on applying pressure there first without worrying about the front because the join at the rear was always going to be better than at the front. I then glue the front half together. It does fit, but it fits in a kind of messy looking way. This will need a bit of further cleanup and probably some putty, which I will do later before painting, which won't be in this video. Next, the exhaust pipes go into the side of the nose here. There's pins to help guide this. Of course, they face backwards like so. Very exhausty. Time for wing assembly. I wasn't sure if this would be better to attach the fuselage to the lower wing part and then add the wing tops, or the other way around. I decided it would be easier and better to put the wing tops on first. There are guide pins to ensure correct positioning of these and they do fit pretty nicely. Unfortunately, owing to how the sprues are connected to these parts, there are some big chunks missing from the front of the wing, which looks really bad. This will obviously need some filling. The left wing looks much worse than the right, though neither will be especially hard to fix. Time to attach the fuselage and wing assemblies. There's a substantial gap either side of the fuselage here and a bit of ugliness down the bottom here too. I clean it up a little more before gluing the assemblies together. I apply pressure to try and minimize gaps, but it was only so effective, and the fit isn't the best, but it is fixable. We're already going to be doing a fair bit of filling, so what's a little more going to hurt? Moving on, I then install the horizontal stabilizers, or at least I believe that's what the term for these is. These go on easily enough. I think I even have them the right way up with the little nub thing on the upper side like so. I then install this antenna behind the cockpit. Just takes a little bit of nudging to make sure it's on nice and straight. Next comes this thing. I think this is a radiator. Whatever it is, it fits nicely onto the raised rectangle here. Then the 20mm cannons can be glued into the larger holes in the front of the wings. You might find that you need to expand these holes a little bit before the guns will fit, but that's not too big a task. Make sure you've got them on nice and straight. Returning to the underside of the plane, I attached this thing. I think it might be an air intake. Make sure to attach it with the pointy end facing rearward. Then I assembled this thing. It's made up of two parts that don't quite fit together perfectly and were a little bit fiddly to get together because of its size and roundedness. Whatever it is, it slots onto this raised guide here. It does look a little bit messy, but I guess that's just one more little thing to fix with putty. I then attach whatever this little thing is. Maybe this is an airspeed measuring tube, which I'm sure has a proper name too. After that's all on, I assemble the landing gear. This is a simple matter of gluing the wheels onto the axle knobs. If you would prefer to model the landing gear in the raised position, there's a single part with the wheel already attached for that. It's a good idea to pay attention to how you're gluing the wheels on. One of mine wasn't quite straight, as I'm sure you'll be able to see later. I installed the assembled landing gear in the appropriate holes on the underside. Nothing especially tricky about this. Just make sure you put them on the right way around. The wheels should face outwards away from the plane. I think I got them on fairly neatly. The only problem is that out of alignment wheel. Oh well, we can always say that it's been sabotaged or something. Those rotten Jerrys did this. Then the tail wheel goes into place. Initially the hole for this wasn't quite big enough, but I changed that with my knife. I nudged the part into what looks to me like the correct position. I then glue the propeller on and rotate it around so the best looking part of the propeller is on top. Also to spread the glue around a bit. This part can be made so it freely rotates. You'll have to follow the instructions yourself for that and install the propeller at the same time as you join both halves of the fuselage together. I didn't want that option, so I just glued it into place. Finally, the canopy goes into place. I'm just going to leave this loose to make painting easier. When I do glue this on, I'll use PVA glue to avoid fogging that can occur on transparent plastic parts when you use plastic cement or superglue. In my opinion, the canopy looks a bit ugly as it is now, but I'm sure a little paint here and there will improve it, along with the rest of the model, which, by the way, is now complete. While it's not a bad model, I wouldn't say this is the best model, and I don't expect the best of the best from Airfix kits, especially the cheaper ones. That's not to say I think it's bad. On the contrary, I think it's pretty decent, especially compared to the other Airfix kits I've built. The parts didn't have too much by the way of mould lines, and I didn't notice any serious moulding errors or other issues other than some questionable sprue gates on the wings. The fit wasn't the greatest, so a fair bit of filling and filing is going to be required before painting this, and I was kind of expecting that. Only a fool wouldn't expect that from a cheap kit. I can't really comment on if this is especially good or bad as far as your average plane kit goes. After all, I haven't built one since I was a kid, but it was pretty enjoyable to build and I didn't encounter any real difficulties. Overall, a good experience that didn't take too long and resulted in what I think is a pretty decent looking representation of a Spitfire. It will of course look more decent when it's painted. I do have a couple more plane kits about the place that I plan to build soon. I know some of you guys have been wanting to see more planes for a while. If you have any suggestions for other, reasonably priced and not awful kits, planes, tanks or other you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments section below. And if you have any questions, comments or other suggestions, they can also go in the comments section. And of course, don't forget to do things like subscribing here on YouTube and following me on social media. And if you really like what I do, you can always help support the channel over at patreon.com/Erpaderp. That would be awesome. Check the links in the description for further information. I shall return soon, so until then, happy Spitfiring, and thanks for watching. Farewell.